Hi, this is Mike King from Profiling Evil. A few nights ago, Chris had the opportunity to interview Andy Moorman, the brother of Suzanne Moorman Morphew. We wanted to ask Andy a few more questions about the time he spent in Salida shortly after her disappearance, share a little bit about what happened in the searches that he participated in, and talk a little bit more about Suzanne. As you know, we really believe that victimology is the key to solving something like this, and we wanted to just remind you of what an amazing person she is. So let's go to Chris and Andy and hear what they have to say, and thanks for joining us.
Tell the audience out here what you want them to know about Suzanne.
Um, just a really gentle soul. I mean, Suzanne is the kind of person, if you lived next door to her, you'd have absolutely loved her. Very nice looking girl, well kept. Been through a lot of battles in her life as far as cancer went and survived them. She was a good mother to her two children. She's a good wife to Barry. Just a really, really kind soul. I mean, a lady that went to church on Sundays, that believed in God and knew the difference between right and wrong. And she loved and reached out to her family whenever she could, even with the poor communication ability of Colorado in the mountains. And we just terribly miss her, and we want answers and some closure to this whole thing.
Yeah, you know, there's a piece of you that is talking in past tense. So tell us a little bit about. Take us back to you growing up with your little sister. Tell us about some of the things you guys used to do together, and how you what were some of her things that she was really into.
Oh, Sesame Street was one of her biggest things when she was little. That's all she wanted to watch, Sesame Street. And we had a Cookie Monster puppet, and of course we'd always have to get a cookie and crumble that up and eat that. And she loved to play hide and seek. She was just a sweet little kid. Her little friends would come over, and we had a full basement in our house with a laundry chute that came down from the second floor. And I remember them hearing them down there riding their tricycles and having fun running around. And I yelled down the laundry chute, "Hey, Suzanne!" She comes over and pokes her head up, looks up at me in the laundry chute, and I dropped a wad of wet toilet paper down through there just. And I teased her about that forever. That was just the funniest thing. Didn't hurt her. It was all in good fun. Her and her friend just laughed. They thought that was just the most hilarious thing ever. But she was a nice kid and had a lot of good friends. And Suzanne, she was kind to everyone. That's the truth.
Yeah. Never been in trouble.
No, not a lick.
Yeah. She's not the kind of gal that would ever get involved in anything illegal. Wow.
No, absolutely not. No way.
Nor is your family.
No.
If I'm correct, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that floats out here in the social media world, and I'm grateful that you guys have risen above that. And, it's really not worth ever even, entertaining. I mean, you can only imagine how many things have been thrown at us as former LE. And, it's just, you rise above it, and you stay with your values and your compass as a family. So we're grateful that you guys have done it.
That's definitely not true stuff. Everybody in my family is doing well, and we don't want for a lot. There's only one thing we're wanting for right now, and that's answers to where my little sister is, to be honest with you.
That's right. Great. So take us back to how you heard, and walk our viewers through on how this all came about in terms of what information you received, okay, how you got involved on the boots on the ground, and then what you would like to see as time goes on.
Okay. Well, this all started on a Monday. It was the day after Mother's Day. Mother's Day fell on the 10th, I believe. And it was the 11th, probably about 2:00 in the afternoon. Phone rings. "Hey, Andy, it's your dad. I'm at work." And Dad says, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No, I'm really super busy right now, Dad. Just get to the point." And he said, "Your little sister's missing." And I said, "What? What the hell are you talking about?" "Your little sister went on a bike ride and came up missing, and they can't find her." And I'm like, when did this happen? He said, Mother's Day. And he said the girls had reached out to her and couldn't get her to wish her happy Mother's Day on their way home from a camping adventure. And Barry couldn't reach her. And they found her bicycle in a ravine. And I was just shocked. So I pretty much ended the conversation with Dad right then on Monday. And I headed for home, which is not very far from where I work. I started packing clothes, and I got a hold of, and they said they're flying out here. I said, can you get me a spot on the plane? Yeah. So wife booked me a spot on the plane, and the next thing I know, I landed in Colorado at night. I'm thinking it was around 8 or 9 p.m. Got off the plane, and we started heading directly for Salida for Barry and Suzanne's house. Well, the house had already been locked down, but the neighbors had an Airbnb next door that they allowed us to stay in, which was a very nice home just down the driveway from Barry and Suzanne. At that time, Barry was staying with the neighbors across the river, basically right behind his house. And we proceeded to throw our bags in the house, and we went directly over there. And I pulled Barry out on the porch, and I said, what the hell's going on? Tell me what's going on. Tell me everything. And he just started in and said, look, I got up Mother's Day morning, 5 a.m. Your sister was laying there asleep. I got dressed. I left for work. I said, what work? He said, I had a job, I believe it was Colorado Springs, where he was building a wall. And they did it last fall, but part of the wall was crooked, wasn't up to standard. So he had to go back in there, take it out, and redo it. And he said, I was going there to set that job site up in the hotel, put the tools in the hotel, so that my crew could show up there the next day and we could start rebuilding that wall. He said, I knew if I did that on Mother's Day, that I could be working in the local area for the next 4 or 5 days. So your sister agreed that that was okay. And the girls were on their way home anyhow. He said, I took off for work. I texted Suzanne later that morning, Happy Mother's Day, didn't get any response. The girls texted her, Happy Mother's Day, didn't get any response.
What time did he leave?
He said 5 a.m. exactly.
And where was Suzanne?
Laying in bed asleep.
Okay.
And they got no reply from these texts of Happy Mother's Day. And Barry said, so I picked up my phone and I called. And I got her voicemail, and I left her a voicemail. Hey, I'm getting a little concerned. Please call me. He didn't hear back from her. So it wasn't too long after that. I think maybe the girls called the neighbor, or Barry called the neighbor and asked her to go over and check on the house, see if Suzanne was home. She did. No one was there. Both Land Rovers were in the garage. And she went back to her landline at her home and called Barry and said she's not there. He said, is her bicycle there? So she went back over, checked, no bicycle. Well, she must be on a bike ride, Barry said. So the next thing you know, I think it was Trevor or one of the kids showed up, and they called the police and said, we got somebody missing. They came out. They started searching. Barry said he arrived back there at 6 o'clock, and by that time they had found the bike. Well,
6 that evening?
Yeah. The problem with that was, I think later on, he said he got back at 9 o'clock. So I don't know, 6 or 9, he was there. And by that time, it must have been really close to dark or dusk. And they had pulled the bike up out of the ravine and thought maybe Suzanne had ridden off the side of that cliff.
Who's they? Well, you say they thought what?
Maybe the police thought that. Maybe Barry assumed that.
Okay. But this is coming from Barry directly.
Yeah, this is Barry talking to me.
Okay, go ahead.
So I asked him right then, I said, have you had any problems with anybody out here? I said, have you had any bad business dealings? Have you had any employees that have gone rogue? Anything silly like that? He said, I just had the one guy that when we were building the wall last fall, I had to fire him off the job because he was on drugs, and he's part of the reason the wall was crooked. And he threatened me. And 1 week ago, he said, I ran into him in town and told him to leave me and my family alone or else. And I said, okay, did you tell the police that? And he said, yes, I did. I said, how did you pay your employees? He said, mostly by check. I said, was your home address on that check? Yeah. I said, did you have any of those employees in the neighborhood? He said, yeah, the one guy I'm talking about was out here. He did some staining on some houses and did a little odd jobs around here. I got him some work out here in the neighborhood keeping these Airbnbs up. So I said, he knew where you lived. Oh, yeah. I said, did you meet him here to take him to a job site? No, usually they drove. I said, what does he drive? And he said at that time, he said, I'm not really sure. There's so many cars show up. I don't know who drives what. So that pretty well ended that conversation that evening.
Okay. And so tell me about, tell everybody about how the structure of what was taking place in terms of what were the police doing? What were you guys doing? How did that all kind of mesh together that day? And we're talking Monday or Tuesday by this point. What day are we?
Okay, so Monday evening. So I finished
Okay.
talking with Barry on the porch. I'm like, bud, you got to get in a good night's sleep. Let's put together a program. Let's get out and start searching, get boots on the ground.
Okay.
So we headed back to the Airbnb. I sat around the table with the three guys that were there, stayed at the house with Barry. And I said, okay, guys, here's what I want to do. I said, we need to form some groups and get out here. And we particularly need to look at this Colorado Trail, both sides, up and down. So we kind of coordinated a bit of a plan that night. And the next morning we got up and I said, look, I want to go see where the hell the bike was found. I want to see the start point of this investigation. So we went there and I stood on the bank of the road looking down into that little valley, and there was some pink flagging down in there where they'd found the bike. And I stood there and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. I thought, there is no way in hell anybody rode a bike off of this cliff and didn't get all skinned up and tore up. There's just no way. Well, Barry, when I got there, was searching up and down that creek. Thought maybe a mountain lion, Suzanne had crashed her bike, or a mountain lion had knocked her off of it and possibly drug her off. Well, I kept thinking about it and thinking about it, and I'm like, there's no evidence down here to show a struggle or an injury of a person on a bicycle. I just knew right then, 20 minutes of standing there, somebody's thrown this bike down here. Human hands did this. And I told Barry that. He didn't want to hear it.
What was his response when you told him?
I don't want to hear that. He said that means somebody else has got her. That means they're doing something to her. And I said, Barry, it's pretty obvious to me that that bike wasn't ridden over that hill. And a mountain lion's not in this picture. And the sheriff later that day even confirmed that. He said, I don't think so. He said, that's a very unlikely scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a male lion that had been seen in that neighborhood a few times, but apparently they come down out of the mountains in the spring, so that maybe that's not so unusual. I guess the unusual part for me was I can see that the bicycle's been thrown there. Why are you looking for a mountain lion? And I attributed that to the fact the guy was in shock. He was exhausted with no sleep, and maybe he's doing what he's best at, searching for wildlife. I mean, Barry's a hell of a hunter, and he's a good outdoorsman. And I played it off at that. I really did.
Okay. Then what happened?
Well, the next day we got up and we drove up a lane next to the Colorado Trail where the trailhead takes off up in the mountains. And we followed it all the way back down to the house. And one of the guys, we were spread out on the trail, 25, 30 yards on each side, just looking for any clues, any evidence. Well, one of the guys kind of got away from us. So Martin and I, the neighbor guy, had to turn around and walk all the way back up the trail. And then we came back down a different way to Martin's house. And sure enough, the guy we misplaced was already there. So we did a pretty thorough, I feel like, thorough search of that whole creek and trail area above the house there. The lower part of the trail was shut down due to flooding and erosion.
So I have a question for you. The dynamics here help us understand.
Okay.
You guys, how many guys from the family concept comes together and starts searching? About how many estimate?
There were 6 of us, I believe.
Okay, and then the police are also doing their thing, right?
They are. They're mostly down in the valley where the bicycle was found, and they asked us not to trample in that area. They didn't want to confuse the dogs with different scents, and didn't really want us, if we stumbled onto something, to mess up a crime scene.
Okay, so and that's important to understand, right? Because you guys are doing another section, the police are doing another area, searching. Everybody's on the same page looking for Suzanne.
Right, and they were allowing us into areas that they had already looked at.
Okay. So then let's fast forward in terms of you do the searching for the day. Do you find any evidence of anything?
Not a thing. When we came down off that Colorado Trail the second time, I bet you we walked within that second personal item. I bet you that wasn't 20 yards from where I came down onto the highway. And I'm surprised that we missed that, but you have to realize it's rough terrain. And when you're walking down a 50% decline like that, you've really got to watch your footing. It's almost stepping rock to rock. And it was brush up to your knees. And it was rough walking, So we missed that. Went back to the house and regathered the next morning for another search.
Okay, so and how many days did this go on?
4 days.
Okay, so in that 4 days time, did you find any evidence of any type of abduction, any type of animal attack, anything that would lead you, and I'm talking about you, to think, okay, there's something else at play here?
Did not find any sign of anything from Suzanne. And I just kept going back over in my mind, why would they throw the bike over that hill? And I thought it over and I thought it over, and I could not envision. I thought, okay, let's imagine that Suzanne had her diamonds on riding her bicycle and they were glistening in the sun, and somebody saw those and wanted them. A homeless person, who knows? Anyway, I got thinking about that. They had taken the rings. They might have knocked her out, but a predator doesn't haul their prey away. They toss them out like trash. And they would have taken the valuables and not know what to do with a human. And that didn't seem to be the case. So I kind of ruled that out. My next thought was, this kind of had to be somebody who's familiar with this neighborhood. And why did they go to such great lengths to throw that bike down in that ravine? That bothered me from day one. I couldn't understand that. Somebody in a hurry, robbing you, mugging you, trying to kidnap you, isn't going to bother with your bicycle much. They're just going to throw it down and move on. Then you got to think, okay, this is supposedly Mother's Day. It's in the middle of the afternoon. This is a trailhead, lots of people. Not a very good place to pull off such a crime in the first place. So here we go. It almost backtracks all the way to the house every time. And I think you guys have even talked about that every time we start to get away from the house, we wind up back at the house. So, and why did the FBI and CBI keep that house locked down for, 5 to 7 days? The whole time I was there, I never have been in my brother-in-law and sister's house. Never did get to see it, except from the end of the driveway.
Now, there was one activity that caused you to stop for a moment, and we don't need to go into the total details, but a friend of yours, we don't need any names, mentioned about a trip with Barry.
Yeah, Barry was in one of the search parties, so he would go off in one direction. We'd split up, divide and conquer. Well, he'd gone the back way up the mountainside there and had stopped, and he got out and wanted to look over a bluff. And my friend got concerned because Barry stopped and laid down on the ground right in the middle of it. And when he came back that day, and we were all sitting around eating a bite, I said, "How did Barry get along today?" Because I was really concerned about the guy. He hadn't slept. He's just crazy looking for Suzanne. And he mentioned, he laid down. I said, "Where were you?" He said, "Well, I took a picture of it, but I can't exactly tell you where." And I think he shared that with the investigators, and they seemed pretty concerned about that area for some reason.
Okay, so we won't get into that right now, but so let's fast forward. Also about this conversation in relationship to these lie detector tests. How does that unfold?
Well, CBI came down here to Indiana, traveled a hell of a long way, and they questioned everybody that Barry and Suzanne knew, and my family members, of course, and myself. So I was sitting there, and the guy said, "Why don't you think Barry did this?" And I said, "Well, because you guys have investigated him. You're good at what you do. You've interrogated him for hours upon hours upon hours." I said, "He's passed lie detector tests, voice analysis." And he stopped me right there, and he said, "Wait a minute. First off, he's not been cooperating with us. And secondly, he refused the voice analysis and lie detector early on." I was like, "What?"
That kind of hit you pretty hard, didn't it?
It did. It did, because at this point, I was looking in a whole nother direction. I assumed this was a stranger abduction. The problem with that is, here again, I don't think strangers hide their victims so well. I really don't. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the investigator told me, he said, "We've sent pack."
Oh, hang on for a minute.
And he said every one of them came back and pointed the finger at Barry. And he said some of his truck EVI information didn't line up. He wouldn't go into details. And he told me to begin with, I can only answer the questions that I'm allowed to answer. And
right. And we don't want to, we definitely do never, we don't want to jeopardize this investigation in any way, shape, or form, right?
I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in finding
right.
And that is the bottom line. Somebody else the other stuff. I got enough on my plate.
Yeah. No, we're with you, and we're grateful that Mike and I can help your family as well as others who would need it and would ask. So let's shift gears for a moment. Your dad the other night. Gosh, we love your dad. He is just the salt of the earth, and you could see it in his countenance. Like your other family members, you just want your sister home. That's the bottom line. And you talk in the past tense. I think you have a gut feeling that you shared with me about whether or not she's alive. And I don't mean to be too personal, but at the same time, I don't want people reading into what you're saying here, that you guys are living in La La Land. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely not living in La La Land. I think generally when you don't find somebody within the first 24 hours, the chances of you finding them alive start to decline. I mean, that's studies and other cases just prove that. And now we're on month 3, and Dad's not in a false reality, and I'm not either. I mean,
right.
It's it's unlikely.
And that's why I wanted to point it out to our viewers.
Yeah.
That is part of what you guys have been processing for the last, 60, 90 days here. It's just not, you've come to this reality, and now it's like, okay, what's the second phase here? And the moment you heard what CBI told you, immediately you kicked into, I'm going to go find my sister.
Yeah.
And that's how we got involved in this in terms of our conversations and how we can help you.
Yeah.
As volunteering, by the way, right? I mean, we're not expect, as French.
No money changing hands here.
Yeah, no, not only there wouldn't be anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead.
Chris, day 4 when I left out there, and I kind of had to leave. I had business at home and family, but I was driving from Barry's house towards the Denver airport, and that's probably the hardest trip I ever made in my life. I cried all the way, and I had come to the reality right then. This is big country. It's really hard to search. It takes so many people, and so many people have already searched. And I just came to I could feel it in my heart that probably Suzanne wasn't here anymore. And that was a really tough trip home. I was unsuccessful, and I regret that I couldn't do a better job than I did. And I tried my hardest. I really did. And if I go back again, I'm going to need a lot of help.
Yeah, and we're going to get you some of that help. Trust me, Andy. I know there's thousands and tens of thousands of people that want to just bring Suzanne home for your family. There's no question.
If I could get that.
So there's one thing your dad wanted to say. There was one thing you mentioned, and I want to remind you, there was something he wanted to say that he forgot to say.
He is so concerned about his 2 granddaughters, and so are we. We've lost contact with them. Mallory and Macy, if you get to see this podcast or this information, please call your grandpa. He's not going to question you. He just wants to know you're all right. And he's really worried about that. And he kicked himself the other night after the interview. He said, I forgot to mention something about the girls. I said, Dad, I'll get something out there for you. I promise. So, part of my reason to talking to you is just to let everybody out there know, man, we so greatly appreciate the comments, the help, and to keep the investigation alive. And also, girls, if you see this, please call your grandpa. We're not asking you anything. He just wants to know you're okay. That's all.
Yeah. So a couple of just logistics. I think you guys are on the horizon here of letting the investigation continue to be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, pointing fingers other than the information that's come to you.
Right.
And simultaneously, though, you also want to see about some search activities potentially coming up. So, we'll keep everybody posted on those types of things that you want to start organizing. We've kind of started talking about that. And, we're going to help you try to put some things together and hopefully without, crossing into any investigative lanes at all. We certainly don't want to ever do that. I mean,
no, absolutely.
That is definitely no.
That's not my job. That's not my job. I only have one job, and that's to find my little sister where I can bring her home.
Yep.
That's what I'm interested in. And I'm afraid these 2 feet can't cover enough ground to get that done. I tried once for 4 days with 6 men. I need that times 1,000. That's a really tall request, but I'm going to put something together before winter. I have to, before the snow flies, and try again.
Okay. Andy, is there anything that I haven't thought of that you would want to share, on this particular, concept here that you're delivering for again, on behalf of your family, that you would want our viewers to know that I haven't brought up or asked you?
Chris, I can't think of it. I just want everybody to know, I come from a pretty simple family. There's nothing complicated going on here. We're all good people, and we all share the same goal in mind, and that's to find our little sister. And my dad really wants to find his daughter, and he also wants to know that his granddaughters are safe and okay. And to let them know, if they want to come to Michigan and see Grandpa, they're more than welcome. We'll make arrangements to have that happen. It would probably be a nice deflection for them.
You're good people. You're good people. Yeah. Well, I can't think of anything else, friend. And guys, Chris, and gals.
Once again, I'm sorry Mike wasn't with us, and I can't tell you guys thanks enough. it's hard to know how to behave and what to say and what not to say in these situations. So if I've come across in the wrong way for anyone, I want you to know it's not my intentions. This is just about finding my sister. I'm not a judge. I'm not a jury. I'm not a lawyer. I'm nothing other than a grieving brother right now.
And you have every right to have those feelings, friend. Every right. And you have a lot of support behind you. And I know you're aware of, you know, both families. I mean, you've expressed to me in private about it. This is traumatic on both sides, and we totally understand that. And
Barry's family are wonderful people. They really are. His mother is just second to none.
Yep.
Anyone would adopt her for a grandmother or mother any day of the week.
Right.
Great lady, and his sisters are nice girls. I mean, this is tough on everyone. It really is.
Yeah.
Not knowing is just horrible.
Yeah. It's always the dynamics that are always tough to navigate through. So God bless you guys. And, you know, we're going to keep the search going for Suzanne because she's still out there. And your motive is 100% pure. And,
it is, I promise.
And that's, we get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So folks, thank you again for tuning in. We excuse Mike. He's out doing some business today. He sends his love as well. And then we're grateful that Andy took the time here on behalf of the Moorman family. Again, call that tip line. Call the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Call the FBI. Call everybody that you feel would be able to give or be able to find results on finding Suzanne. Until then, we're not going to give up.